We're learning the fourth Sikha of Parshas Teruma in Chelek Tezayin on page 309. This shir is being learned to the Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. The Sikha here is a very unique Sikha. It's a siyum, a hadran, a mesechta chagige, and it's a very long Sikha. The Rabbi will take us through many different sugyas in Shas and show us l'shitasai of Beishamai and Hillel. We're going to go through a lot of different inyanim in the Sikha. There's some very intricate, complicated inyanim as well. Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach, let's begin. In dem Pasuk, wo es wird gesagt, dem Tzivui auf Binyan HaMishkan v'HaMikdash. In the Pasuk in this week's Parsha, the Torah tells us the mitzvah of building the Beis HaMikdash, which is v'osu li Mikdash, wird in selben Pasuk gleich ausgeführt. So in the same Pasuk, it says immediately, as the Kavane und Tachlis von dem Binyan is, the purpose of building the Beis HaMikdash is, v'shachanti b'soichem, that the Eibusha will dwell in it. Es soll sein ashras hashchine b'mishkan u'mikdash, that the Shchine will dwell in the Mishkan and the Mikdash. Von die Ikrei ha'avedis beBeis HaMikdash is given the avedis ha'karbanis. From the main avedis that the war in the Beis HaMikdash is the karbanis. Wie der Rambam sagt, as the Rambam says in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, as tachlis mitzvahs binyan HaMikdash, that the purpose of building the Beis HaMikdash is das la'avda bai, la'aveda that is, la'aveda bai, to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, or again, la'aveda, to serve, bai yeh ha'akrave, that over there you sacrifice the karbanis, v'hav aras ha'eish tamid, and you bring the fire on the Mizbeach that has to burn there constantly. Therefore is verstandig, so we understand from this, as from the ikidige klei HaMikdash is given the Mizbeach HaChitzen. From all the different vessels that were in the Beis HaMikdash, the main keli in the Beis HaMikdash is the Mizbeach that was on the outside in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. Oivelachamot makriv given the karbanis, on which they brought all the karbanis. Was wegen dem Mizbeach, Retzich, and Seifon und Parsha. About this Mizbeach, the Torah speaks about and tells us how to build this Mizbeach in the end of this week's Parsha. Unoich, the Mizbeach HaPnimi, and also that there was the Mizbeach that was on the inside, in the Heichal of the Beis HaMikdash, was wegen im steht, et Tzivui in Seif Parshas Tetzaveh. And the mitzvah of building the Mizbeach HaPnimi is in Parshas Tetzaveh, and over there, they brought the Keteiros on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. Auf dem Pasuk Vasil in Mikdash Goyim is sagen Chazal. Regarding this pasuk of building the Beis HaMikdash, Chazal tell us, B'soichoi lo nemar elo b'soicham. The Torah does not use a singular term in it, but rather in them. B'soich kol echad ve'echad mi Yisrael. That Eibusha dwells within every single Yid. As Yed Yid of Zayin HaMikdash. Every single individual Yid has to be himself a Mikdash. Ubemele is muvan. So we understand, as Yed Yid of Poyel Zayin, durch Zayin Aveda, a Yid has to have the effect through his Aveda, as the Shchine soll Sheire sein Kaviyachol in the Mikdash was in him. To bring that the Shchine should dwell within him, in the Mikdash that's within him. Eine von der Yerte, now one of the places, wo Chazal reden wegen beide Mizbachais, where Chazal speak about both of the Mizbachais that was inside and outside, und wo es ist mudgish sehr Sheiches zum Mishkan und Mikdash was in jeden Yidden, and where it's emphasized the relation of the Mishkan and Mikdash that was in the Beis HaMikdash to the Mishkan and Mikdash which is within every single Yid, is an Emsiyum from Masechta Chagige. This is at the conclusion in the last Mishnah and in the last piece of Gemara of Masechta Chagige. So here the Rabbi begins the Siyum, what it says there in the Mishnah. In Saif, from the letzte Mishnah in Chagige wird gesagt. At the end of the last Mishnah in Chagige, it says as follows. Kol ha-kelim shahayu b'mikdash. All of the vessels in the Beis HaMikdash, tu'unin tvile. They would require to be toivled. And what is this talking about? So the Rebbe here brings, nach jeder regel, after every Yom Tiv, hat man gedacht toivel sein, die klei HaMikdash. They had to immerse in a mikveh all of the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. Was sie sind Tame geworden, because they became Tame durch dem, was Amei Haaretz haben sie angerührt. Because you could have Koyanim that are Ameratzim, and they are allowed to enter into the Beis HaMikdash, and they may have touched, while they are Tame, any of these Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore, after Yom Tov, we have to toivel them until they should be toiv. Says the Mishnah, Chutz min Mizbeach Hazav u'Mizbeach HaNachoshes, excluding the Mizbeach Hazav, the golden Mizbeach, which is inside in the Beis HaMikdash, and the copper Mizbeach, which is outside in the courtyard, Mipnei Shehein Kekarka, because they have a status like the ground itself. and therefore they are not susceptible to tumah. And even if a person that was tummy touched it, it doesn't become tummy. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. The Chachamim say, Mipnei shehem mitzupim, because they are plated. They're plated with gold or plated with copper. Now, what exactly the Chachamim are saying here by pointing out the fact that these mizbachais are plated? We'll see in the continuation here, as the Rabbi will bring in what it says in the Gemara. On the Gemara is Masber das Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara explains the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer why the mizbachais do not become tamei. For Vanem Weisman as the mizbachais and vikarka. Where do we see that the mizbeach is compared to the ground itself, which the ground is not susceptible to any tumah? Und the far is of zeh nitchal ken tumah, and therefore on the mizbachais as well, no tumah takes effect. Because in the pasuk it says mizbeach hanachayshes. So the Gemara says regarding the mizbeach hanachayshes, it says the chsiv mizbeach hadama tasali, that the Eibusha says you should build for me a mizbeach hadama, a mizbeach of earth. So we see that the Torah refers to the mizbeach as being a mizbeach of earth, like the ground itself. Mizbeach hazav. Now, regarding the mizbeach hazav, it doesn't clearly say in the Torah that it's compared to adama or to karka. But the chsiv, there is a pasuk where it says hamenayra vehamizbachais, the menayra and the mizbachais. So in this one word mizbachais, it puts together both of the mizbachais. Iskish mizbachai zelazeh. So from this word we learn out that we compare the mizbeach hazav to the mizbeach hanachayshes. Just like the mizbeach hanachayshes, the Torah tells us is adama, it's like karka. So too the mizbeach hazav is like karka, and therefore it's not susceptible to tumah. That's the pshat in what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. The Gemara then explains, what does it mean when Chachamim say that these mizbachais were plated? On Nemidig, and the Gemara initially is thinking, as a zogender mitatam, favas the mizbachais ver nit tameh. That Chachamim are also coming to give a reason, a different reason, why the mizbachais do not become tameh. And Chachamim are saying that the mizbachais are not susceptible to tumah because they're plated. And the Gemara asks the question on this. Adarabba, on the contrary, Kivin, the mitzupim ninu mitamu. Because they are plated with gold or copper, this itself should be a reason why they should become tameh. And Rashi is mefarish, and Rashi explains the meaning of the Gemara's question. Varum, because v'niter tzipui, if not for the fact that the mizbeach is plated, wollten sie doch gedarft sein toher. So then these mizbachais should actually be tahir, besides the fact of what we mentioned before, that Rabbi Eliezer said, that the mizbachais are compared to karka, and therefore they're tahir. A different reason. If the mizbachais were not plated, and what was the material of the mizbachais themselves? They were made from wood, so it should be tahir. When you have a wooden vessel that is designated to be positioned in one place to remain there, and it's not a movable object from one place to another, such a kli eitz does not become tameh. And as the Gemara here, the Rabbi brings in Order 13, the source of what it says there in the Gemara, that you learn it out from a pasuk, that you compare a kli eitz to a sack cloth. Just like a sack cloth is susceptible to tameh, and it only becomes tameh because its nature is that it's something that's movable from one place to another. So we compare the kli eitz, which is written in that very same pasuk, that any wooden vessel cannot become tameh unless it's also a movable item. If it's an item that is made to stay stationary in one place, kli eitz does not become tameh. Now, this limitation that if it's stationary it does not become tameh is specifically b'negei to a kli eitz, b'negei to a vessel made of wood. But if it's a metal vessel, any kind of metal, whether it's gold or copper, it will become tameh. So hence we have the Gemara's question over here. The fact that these mizbachais, which were made of wood, but were plated with metal, whether gold or copper, so the plate of gold and copper is a reason that it should become tameh. So why is Chachamim saying that Pnei Shem Mitzupim, it does not become tameh? And the Gemara answered. So the Gemara gives two answers to this. One answer is the Gemara says, Eimeh, so you have to say and understand as follows. Chachamim are arguing with Rabbi Eliezer, and they're actually saying that the mizbachais will become tameh because they're plated with this metal plate, or whether gold or copper, that makes it susceptible to tameh. As the Chachamim zene mechulik with Rabbi Eliezer, Chachamim argue with Rabbi Eliezer, und sie halten, and their opinion is, as euch die Mizbechais sind Tame geworden, that the Mizbechais did become Tame, taket zalib zeh tzipui. Yes, because of the plated metal that's on it, it becomes Tame. That's one pshat in the Gemara. Nachat for the Gemara, another pshat the Gemara says, what Chachamim are saying here with these words, Mipnei Shem Mitzupin. Or I can tell you the following pshat. Rabbanon l'Rabbi Eliezer ka'amri. Rabbanon are saying this to Rabbi Eliezer. They're asking on Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. They're not saying their own opinion, but they're sort of asking on Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. My daiteich, what is your opinion? Mishum de mitzupin, because it was plated. But if so, that doesn't matter. The plate does not matter, because miftul batl tzipuyan gabayo. The plate that the mizbachais have is not significant. It's abzah. We don't look at it as a significant thing, since the main vessel is the vessel itself, not the plating of the vessel. Okay, now I'm just reading and translating the words of the Gemara, but this needs a clarification. What exactly are the Rabbanon telling Rabbi Eliezer when he says, "My daitech"? What is your opinion about this? So, in the next paragraph, the Rabbi explains this. Let into Rashi. So Rashi explains that what the Rabbanon are saying is as follows. The Rabbanon zogen to Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbanon are saying to Rabbi Eliezer, "My daitech." What is the source of your opinion? For what point here? As das, was Rabbi Eliezer darf ankommen zum Tam, was die Teure ruft sie an Adama. Rabbi Eliezer, in order to explain why the Mizbachais are not susceptible to Tumah, Rabbi Eliezer brought a pasuk that compares the Mizbachais to Adama, that it's like karka, it's like the ground itself. Und nor the far zan is a Teure. And that's the only reason why these Mizbachais are Teure, they're not susceptible to Tumah. That was the reason Rabbi Eliezer says. So the question that the Rabbanon had in Rabbi Eliezer is, why do you need this special pasuk to teach me that it's compared to the ground and therefore it's not susceptible to Tumah? There's another reason that they could have said without this, as was quoted before here. And it wasn't sufficient to say their tam that because the mizbachais are from wood, and any wooden vessel that's made to stay stationary in one place is not susceptible to Tumah. Why didn't they just say and accept that reason? Why are they looking for a new reason to explain why the mizbachas are not susceptible to Tumah? So what is your my daitech? So what was your reason? The reason is because it's plated. Und das is a mevatel von dem Geder eitz. So now that it's plated, so it's not anymore a wooden vessel. Now it's a gold mizbeach or it's a copper mizbeach. It changes its status. So therefore the reason of it being a wooden vessel that's made to be stationary is not enough of a reason. It's not susceptible to Tumah. Now it's already a metal vessel, and it would be susceptible to Tumah. So therefore they had to give a special reason that it's compared to Adama, to the ground, and therefore does not become Tumah. Zogen der of the Rabbanon, on this the Rabbanon are telling Rabbi Eliezer, as mivtul batul tzipuyan gabayu. The fact that it's plated does not change its status of being a wooden vessel. The tzipui, the plate, is bottled to what the material of it itself really is. As a yes, the Torah ruft sie an eitz. Since we find that the Torah refers to this mizbeach as a wooden mizbeach. Meintes, so what this means is, as der tzipui shel matches, that the metal plate on it, vert nis battle legabi zeh. It's absolved, it's not significant, and we consider the main definition of what this is to be a wooden vessel. Sie bekommen in Ganzen dem Geder von Eitz. The Mizbachais are defined as being a wooden vessel. Und bemeile, then is nit mekabel tumah. So therefore, they should not be mekabel tumah because of this fact that it's a wooden vessel that remains stationary. Kli'eit, so osil nochas. Chachamim are essentially asking a question on Rabbi Eliezer. Why did you have to find a new reason that it's compared to Adama, that it's not mekabel tumah? Why couldn't you stay with the reason that would be that it's a material of wood and therefore it's not mekabel tumah? Okay, so in other words, how do we read the words of Chachamim Maimrim Mipnei Shehem Mitzupin according to this second shot? Mipnei Shehem Mitzupin was Chachamim sort of wondering. Mipnei Shehem Mitzupin, your reason was because it's plated, so therefore it's not wood anymore? No, but it still is wood. So Mitzupin, according to both of these pshatim that Rashi here said, is actually a reason why it should become tameh. Whether Mipnei Shehem Mitzupin, so therefore now it's not wood anymore, it's metal. and therefore it's susceptible to tumah, or mipnei sheim mitzupin, Chachamim are sort of questioning and wondering on what Rabbi Eliezer said, is the reason you would say that they would be susceptible to tumah is because it's mitzupin? This is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara here. The Rambam abalerent, however, the Rambam has a different pshat in the Gemara. As das was the Rabbanan sagen, mipnei sheim mitzupin. When the Rabbanan over here say that because the Mizbech is plated, what are the Rabbanan saying with this? Is this nit gemeint via tam letame, leidas Rabbi Eliezer? They're not coming to give a reason why the Mizbeach would be tameh according to Rabbi Eliezer, asking a question on Rabbi Eliezer. Not atam letayer leitzei shita. Rather, they're giving an alternative reason why the Mizbeach should be toy. The fact that the Mizbeach is plated is actually a reason for the Mizbeach to be toy. Even though it's a metal plate, and according to what we said until here, a wooden material of a vessel, if it's made to be stationary, that's not susceptible to tumah. But metal, even if it's stationary, it is susceptible to tumah. But nevertheless, according to the Rambam, the fact that it's plated with metal is actually a reason it should be toher. What's the basis for this? This is wieder Sifra sagt, this is based on what it says in the Sifra, auf dem Pasuk, kol kli asher yaseh malacha behem, that any kli that you use for your work is susceptible to tumah. So the Sifra learns out from that pasuk as follows: Yachol shani marbe es chipuye kelim. I would think that this includes also when you have a vessel that's plated, and even when you touch the plate of this keli, that the keli becomes tummy. Talmud loymar bahem. So the pasuk over here says bahem, in it. What does in it mean? Prat lechipuye kelim. That if you have a plate or cover over a keli, and you only touch the plate of the keli itself does not become tameh. As oib der shimush is nit in gufa keli, if you do not use the keli itself directly because it's plated, nor durch chipuy tzipuya keli, you could only use it through the cover or the plate that there is on this keli, is the keli nit makabel tumah. So the keli itself, is which you never touch directly, is not going to be makabel tumah. So we see over here that the plate that there is over a keli actually makes it not susceptible to tumah. It's only if you touch the keli itself directly. Now, but the question still remains, how about the actual plate itself on the keli? The plate itself you did touch, that should become tumah. So the Rebbe continues and clarifies over here. And now, as the Mefarshim explained the opinion of the Rambam, lernt der pshat from miftul bottle tzipuyen gabayu, so that the Rambam understands the words of the Gemara. When the Gemara says that the tzipuy, the plate is bottle, the plate is insignificant. As loit the Rabbanon, according to the Rabbanon, is tzipuy nit kein sibbe zum metame sein de keli. The fact that there's a plate on the Mizbeach is not a reason for the Mizbeach to be Tomei, wie das sagt Rabbi Eliezer, like it would be according to Rabbi Eliezer, no verkehrt, on the contrary. Der Zipui von Matchis is a tam zum Metayer sein. The plate on the Mizbeach is actually a reason that the Mizbeach should be Toher. Why is that? Zayindig blois at Zipui zu der Keli. So the fact that it's only this metal, which is usually susceptible to tumah, but the fact that this metal is only a plate on this wooden vessel, on the Mizbeach, is a b'meile bottle to the keli. So one point is, the plate itself is not susceptible to tumah because it's insignificant for itself. The plate is not a keli. The plate is just a metal plate for the wooden keli. So it itself is not susceptible to tumah. Unken deribin et oiftan in ir dem din von Kabbalah's tumah. So in the plate itself, there is no susceptibility to tumah. On the keli vider, on the other hand, the actual vessel itself, which is plated, also does not become tameh. Mitzad zichalein b'shas zihat a base kibble, even though it itself is a keli and it's a base kibble. One of the basic requirements for a keli to be susceptible to tumah is that it has to have an area where it's a receptacle. But now that it's plated, it also can't become tummy. As the shimush in ear is because you don't use the vessel directly, you're only using the vessel indirectly through the plate. When a keli that's covered and it's plated is nismayed for the tumah. That was excluded from any tumah, as we learned from the pasuk bahem. Only if you access and touch the keli directly, not if it was plated. So therefore, what the Gemara is saying is, Rabbanan are saying to Rabbi Eliezer that you don't need the reason that you're saying that the Mizbachais did not become Tameh because it's Adama, because it's compared to the ground. Rather, the very fact that it's plated is the reason why it's not susceptible to any Tumah. The plate itself is not a keli, so the plate itself is bottled to the keli, so it is not susceptible to tumah. The keli itself, which is plated by this plate, does not become tumah because you're never using the keli directly, bohem, you're only using the plate, the keli through the plate, and therefore there's no tumah. That's the Rambam's pshat in the Gemara. So what's the conclusion of all of this? The fun kumtais, so now it comes out as Rashi und der Rambam zene mechulik in dem Geder von den Zipoi Leute Rabbanon. Rashi and the Rambam are arguing and how we define the halacha of a plate over a keli according to the Rabbanon. What are the Rabbanon saying when they're using this expression b'pnei shehem mitzupim, because it's plated? Loishit is Rashi kumtais. According to Rashi's opinion, it comes out as a tzipui von matches by kliates. When you have a wooden keli which is plated with a metal, is a sibitzu metamazayin the keli. That would actually be a reason to make the keli susceptible to tumah. Oich lefidas rabbanon, and even the rabbanon would agree to this. Not by the Mizbachais, halten the Rabbanon. Over here, regarding the Mizbachais, what the Rabbanon are saying to Rabbi Eliezer is, Azezen and Tahir, that even though it's plated, and the fact that it's plated should be a reason that it should be susceptible to Tumah, but over here, the Mizbachais are different and they should be Tahir. The Fav is the Tater of Tziyanes, because even after it's plated, we see that the Tater refers to the Mizbeach as being a Mizbeach of wood, so the plate is insignificant. But the very fact that it is plated with metal, that's a reason that it should be susceptible to Tumah. On lefidas Rambam is tzipui kelim b'chlal. The Rambam says no. On the contrary, when you have a covering, a plate on a keli in general, atam zu vermeiden den Tumah von keli amitzuppe kanal. This is actually a reason that prevents the keli of being susceptible to Tumah, because the keli is never being accessed directly. It's only being accessed through this plate on it. And the plate itself is insignificant. It's not a keli for itself. So this is a reason why it should be tahir. Mamish, two opposite pshatim in the same words of mipnei sheim mitzupim. Darfen verstehen. So the question here on this is, was is the tam, v'svara, what is the reason and the logic, was that the Rambam learned andish the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer mit the Chachamim vi Rashi? Why did the Rambam learn the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim different than Rashi? Ubefrat, and our question specifically is, as their Lashon HaGemara v'yibai yiseimer Rabbanon l'Rabbi Eliezer kamri, the language the Gemara over here uses, that the Rabbanon, when they use the terminology mipnei sheim mitzupim, is not explaining their own reasoning that mipnei sheim mitzupim explains why they would hold that it is toy, but rather they're speaking according to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. They're asking a question on Rabbi Eliezer. Is glatikel if yishittas Rashi? Those words in the Gemara are smoother understood according to Rashi. That the Gemara is coming to say mipnei sheim mitzupin is actually a reason that it should be tamei. And this was Rabbanan's question on Rabbi Eliezer. Is this perhaps your reasoning why you had to find a new reason why the Mizbech is like compared to Adama? Because it's mitzupin and therefore you would think that it would be tamei. That fits better with Rashi. Not according to the Rambam though. V'mefarshim and Nesmazber, as it's explained in Mefarshim. So therefore the question is, why does the Rambam learn the pshat in the Gemara mipnei sheim mitzupim, that it's actually a reason that it should be tahir according to the Rabbanan? Okay, so this is the siyum of Chagiga and the piece of Gemara that explains the last piece of the Mishnah with the Shitta of Rashi and the Rambam, and the Rebbe will explain the Shitta of the Rambam. Es ist nicht Pashut der Minig. Now the Minig has become zu verbinden, to connect in a hadrin, siyum ha-Masechta mit der Aschala. The conclusion of Masechta with the beginning of this Masechta. Was der Tam davon is, nitle pulpula or lechidude ba'alma. This is not just to show how sharp you are, and you could show that there's a connection from the beginning to the end. Nor weil sie haben taka shayches v'kesher in teichen yiyonim. But rather, this is actually the fact that in Teire, when you have one Masechta, and there's the beginning and the beginning and the end are really connected. The same is true here as well. The conclusion of the Masechta with the beginning of the Masechta, which will be explained further on in the Sikha. But here, to explain the basis of the Shitta of the Rambam, why the Rambam is learning the Machlekes of the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer the way he does, and specifically that he explains that the Chachamim, when they use the terminology Mipnei Shein Mitzupim, the fact that the Mizbech is plated is a reason for it to be Toher, not to be Tomei. So to explain the Rambam, we could say as follows: the Rambam nemton. What the Rambam accepts over here, the basis of the Rambam's opinion is, as the Machlokes dot zwischen Rabban and Rabbi Eliezer. This argument here between Rabban and Rabbi Eliezer was Rabbi Eliezer Shamutihu. The Gemara tells us that there was a story where Rabbi Eliezer argued with the Chachamim very vehemently, and it became a very heated argument, a very interesting story in the Gemara in Bava Metzia. You can take a look. And the Gemara there says that in the end they placed Rabbi Eliezer in a shamuti, which is some form of excommunication. So from Talmidei Beis Shammai, and he was from the students of Beis Shammai. So if so, the Rambam holds is verbunden. So therefore, this machlokes here between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim is connected on his alishitase, and this follows a certain line of thinking on asvara klalis, a general logic of how you approach things. Was is a yisoid zu viele andere Plukte zwischen Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, which is a fundamental point that explains many arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Das heißt, what this means is, hayos as an atzal pluktis from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that in many arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, gefindt man atzad hashava and zeir deis, we see that there's a certain common thread in their thinking, in the basis of their opinions that they argue. And this is true about various different subjects that come up in their arguments in different places in Shas. Is mistaver, so therefore it's logical to say, as the Yisoid from Zer Machlokes in the Erter, that it's logical to say that the fundamental point of their argument in all of these places is nit mitzad der besonderen Teichen von jeder Machlokes b'fnei atzmai. It's not that there is a different content and there's a separate Machlokes in each place separately. Nor ze zenen alle miyusa ven Yisoid. All these arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are based on one fundamental point that we can see that they're arguing about. And as the Gemara itself says many times, as Meget l'shitase, when the Gemara points out a certain machlekes, and then it connects it to a machlekes of the same Tanoim or Amirayim in a different place, and it says, we can see how they're following their same opinion, the same line of thinking in another place. So over here as well, there's many different arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. We can see that there's a certain thread of thinking that they're arguing about in all of these scenarios. Uledogme al kolpanim, so just to bring, at least as an example, ein plukte b'chol seder. We'll bring over here one argument of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in each one of the Sedarim, of the four Sedarim of Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Okay, so here the Rebbe is going to take us around to the different Sedarim of Shisha Sidrei Mishnah and point out machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and where there's a common thread that runs through them. In Seder Zrayim, so we have an argument in Seder Zrayim in Masechta Brachos, Benusach HaBracha Oiv Eish B'Motzei Shabbos Kodesh. In the exact words that you say in the bracha on the fire on Motzei Shabbos Kodesh, gefinnen mir a pluktet zwischen Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So there's an argument here between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai say shebara ma'ira eish. The Eibusha created the light of fire. Beis Hillel say boirei ma'ira eish. The Eibusha created the lights of fire. In other words, Beis Shammai say you use a singular term, the light of fire, and Beis Hillel say you use a plural term, the lights of the fire. And the Gemara is masbezeh machlokes. So the Gemara explains what they're arguing it is about as follows. The Beis Shammai say chada nohire ikke benura, that there is only one fire in this. There's only one light in this fire. In Eish is doubles ein gaven oir. There's only one color of light in the fire. Und the fire darf man sagen mar b'lashon yachid. So therefore you say mar, the light, in a singular term. Beis Hillel savri, however, Beis Hillel disagree and say tuve nahayre ikke benura. There are many colors in fire. And the Gemara brings Tanya Nami Hachi. We see this in the Braisa as well. Omrule and Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel say to Beis Shammai, Haba Meiris Yashbar. There are many lights, there are many colors in the lights of fire. In Eish and in Da, Merere Gvanim, there are the following colors. Shalheves Aduma. In the flame, you have the reddish part of the flame. Levana, the whitish part of the flame. V'yirak Rakes. And you have the greenish part of the flame. So therefore, you have to say the plural term of Ma'ire Ya'esh. The Fahrer darf man sagen, Ma'ire, Lashon Rabim. That's the argument, the way it's said in the Gemara. Now, it's Pashit, it's obvious, as Beishameh, Besilil, Kirigin it na Metzias. They're not arguing about a fact of life that everybody could see. Was b'Metzias Zetman, as an Enda, einige Gvanim in a Mer, that you see that there are several colors in the light of the fire. So how do Beishameh come and say that there's only one color of light in the fire? Now the hezbollah fun is, so the answer and the explanation is, and here comes the fundamental point that Beishameh and Besilil argue about in many different places. Beishameh's approach is, as al pi Torah, that according to what Torah tells us, the way we have to look at things, how do we determine the existence of something or the halacha of something? It's based on the general content of something. The way you see it, by the very first general glance, you see it in general terms, generally, that general terms of the way you see it in, that's actually what determines what it is. Okay? That's Beishameh's approach. Now, the Rebbe points out in Order 34, this is not because Beishameh is oblivious of the details that may be there when you look deeper into this matter or deeper into this being here or this existence here. Rather, Beishameh says, yes, there are all those details there, but nevertheless, Torah tells you that the details that exist there do not determine its status. Rather, the halacha will follow that general perspective that you have on it and the general existence of it. That's the way the halacha determines what the mitzias is. Al derech haklal, this is similar to the concept that a judge, which is judging a matter, could only judge based on what his eye see. Right? When you're looking and what your eye see, that's what determines the halacha. Sometimes you might think, let me look at the motive, let me look at things that may have caused this. So for example, if the Bezin, they saw that the person was Machal Shabbos, or they saw that he was not Machal Shabbos, whatever they saw a person doing, what they saw is what they saw. Different things that may have happened in the motive of the person, that's not something they can see, and that's only the Eibishter knows. And that's not for the Bezdin to take into account. What the Bezdin sees is what they see, and that will determine the actual psak din. The same thing is also benegay to the halacha over here of a bracha that you make, that you have to determine the bracha based on the way you see the general existence of this when you look at it with a general glance. The shitta from Beis Hillel is, however, the opinion of Beis Hillel is, as man darf sich beikir rechnen mit die Inyanim, wie die Inyanim werden voneinander geklippen, leut sehr praten und neufanem. The way you determine the status of something is only when you look deeper and you see the details that exist there and you dissect it and you see the different applications and the cause and the effect and so on. That's what determines the halacha of this. Although this aspect of this existence of this is not something that you see immediately, this is not the general definition of this existence. Only by reflection or by deeper investigation do you see what's going on over here. But nevertheless, it's those details that determine the entity of what this is. And that is what determines in Torah what the true being of this is. This is the fundamental point of the machlokes of Beishameh and Beis Hillel that we have here, and as the Rebbe will point out in many different places. The Rambam is moving the time for Zeir machlokes. So this explains our argument right over here. The Geder, al pi Torah, how do you determine, how do you define something? The din by Birchas HaNer is the halacha when you make the bracha on the ner, on the candle. Motzei Shabbos is as ein mevarchen al ner ad she'yosel oirei. You don't make the bracha on the candle until you have benefit of this light. The chiyuv from the bracha is nor dan v'meken hana haben. The bracha is only then when you could have ana of it, or the mahat ana b'pile from the moir, or when you actually have ana from this light. Although you don't necessarily have to actually have ana from the light, this is not a birchas hanenin. You're not making a bracha because of the actual ana that you're having. It's a bracha thanking Hashem for creating the existence of light. The ana kommt gleich beim Dezen der Oer bechlolus. This ana reaches the person as soon as the general shine of the light comes to you. Was damot zet estamar. And then what does a person see immediately then? The light of the candle. Ein licht gaven. You see one light with one color. Chad and This is what Beishameh is pointing out. The light that comes to you immediately at the first glance, that's just the stam, one color of light. The Rebbe halten Beishamai, therefore Beishamai say, as euch die Brache darf sein of the Brie von Kloleseish, you thank the Eibishter for the creation of fire in general. Moireish, the light of fire. On the other hand, Basil accept the opinion as vibald bis bayinus in eish. Since if you look deeper into what the existence of this fire is, the zeta kamamaitis, so you see the different colors that are here. The fact is that the benefit that there comes from this light is coming from all the different colors that the fire consists of. So therefore the nusach of the bracha has to be ma'ire, with a plural term. That's the actual metzius of what it really is when you look in details and you see what there is there in the light of this fire. That's the machlokes here between Beishamai and Beisilo. Okay, so again, let me just emphasize again, it's not the pshat that Beishamai is oblivious to the details that are there. What Beishamai is saying is, that's not what determines, though, the gather of its metzias al pitayra. When we come to make a bracha, we have to determine it based on what the general metzias is. Beis Hillel says, though, no, that the details that you see, that's what determines its metzias. That's in Seder Zroim. In Seder Noshim in Masechta Ksubis. Then you have in the Gemara in Ksubis where there's the following argument. Keitzad meraktan lefnei akala. How do you dance in front of a kala when you want to bring the simcha to the kala? And really what they're arguing about over here is, what's the message? What do you say to the kala to bring her joy? Beishamai Yomrin, so Beishamai say, Kala kamoishihi, every kala as is, you have to see the kala and praise her for what she has, for what she is. Which means, Lefi Yofia v'chashivusa mekalsanaisa, according to her beauty or her level of prominence, that's how you praise her. Pirish Rashi. Beisilo Loimrim, but Beisilo say, Kala noa v'chasuda. You praise every kala, regardless of who she is, that she's beautiful and attractive. Amrulem Beishamai leBeisilol. So Beishamai say to Beisilol, Harei shoisach higere. So what's if a kala is lame, or sumo, or she's blind? Oimrim lo kala noa v'chasuda. So you tell her that she's beautiful and attractive. And the Torah says, Midvar sheket tirchak, stay far away from saying a lie. Amrulem Beisilol leBeisamai. So Beisilol respond to Beishamai. So leDivreichem, and according to your opinion, Mishalakach mekach ram and ashok, a person that made an acquisition in the marketplace, and it's something which is defective. Should you praise the person? Should you praise the object that he bought in his eyes, that it's beautiful and it's good? Or you got an enabeinov? Or should you point out the defect that it has and so on? Definitely you should only praise what the acquisition that the person made. It's not nice to go and talk about the defect that it has or so on. That's the argument that the Gemara says in Ksubis. So the Rebbe says, es is doch poshit, it's obvious, as oich loit Beis Hillel is faran det zivu mit vasheket tirchak. Of course, Beis Hillel agrees to the fact that you're not allowed to lie. And as oich loit Beishamai, and also on the other hand, according to Beishamai, is b'shas eine koiftam mekach, darf man es for him mishabeach sein. When a person buys an item, so you have to praise it for him. Beishamai agrees to this menschlichkeit, that you shouldn't just go and tell a person, oh, look how defective this item is that you bought. So how do we explain this argument here? Nareichda is that hesber as again lishitasam. So over here as well, we could see how Beis Hillel and Beishamai are following their line of thinking here. Beishamai halt, mit auf allemal annehmen die Sach, wie sie zeta is gleich, leuten klol is den Blick. That when you determine something, according to Torah, based on the first glance, the way this existence is generally. And therefore, since as by Oster, Kala, zenen oti mailes von noa v'chasuda nit anzendig. When you have a Kala that's whether lame or blind, and therefore her beauty or her attractiveness is not something that's noticeable at all, hot ken art nit zum Kala sein mit oti mailes. So there's no room to praise her with any of these attributes. Navim izet gleich. You have to praise with what you see right away. Kala kamaishihi, a Kala as is. Und Beis Hillel that is halten, l'shitasam, however, Beis Hillel, their opinion is, as medaf nemen in batracht de pratim. You have to look further and see the details, and it's those details that determine how you define this. The way you see the existence upon reflection. Hayos, as der chosen lokach mekach, since this chosen bought himself an acquisition. hat ausgeklippen hat die Kala. He chose this Kala. Is apshita, so it's obvious, as in seine Augen is sie a nova chasuda. If he chose her to marry her, so definitely in his eyes, she is beautiful and attractive. And al pizeh yumtak the hemshech, and this will explain better also the continuation of the Gemara, where it says, Mikan amr chachamim, from here chachamim said that we learn, La'olam tehei daita shel adam u'urevis amabrius. A person should always be mu'revis amabrius, which Rashi says means that you should always be sympathetic or empathetic with people in their different opinions and approaches on things. Varam fundem zetmen, as we bald as ein de same shavis. We see over here in a person that chooses a wife, that every person sees beauty in a different way. So you evaluate every person accordingly with his opinion. And therefore you have to treat everybody and try to understand everybody, where they're coming from. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, never judge a person until you come to his place. Everything that's included in his place, his condition, his situation, his circumstances, and so on, his level. And when you take into account other people's approaches and other people's attitude, so then even briyos, even a person that's just merely a creation of Hashem, seems to have no advantage to him whatsoever, nevertheless, you can come to see even something good about him as well. So now, since Beis Hillel says there must be something that's beautiful about this Kala, after all, this person chose her for that reason. When a person comes and says that she's a Kala Nova Chasuda, it's not a lie. If you look into the details of who she is, Zetman as beyachas su'ad dem chasen, is itaka Kala Nova Chasuda. That in relation to this chasen that chose her for those aspects of beauty that he found in her, so she's really beautiful. And therefore you praise her for that you see upon reflection those details that are beautiful in her. However, according to Bishamai's opinion, as their klal is the gegeda v'riyah is keveya, that when you look at things in its first glance and you see the general outline of what this is, which is a real existence of this, and in the appearance, there is no beauty here. And this is what determines what it is. So for a woman that she's lame or she's blind, you can't say that she's beautiful and attractive. So therefore, this is it is defined as saying a lie, and therefore, how could you say that she's kala nova chasuda? So it depends what determines the existence of this kala that brings them each to their conclusion. So here again, you see the same line of thinking in their argument. So this argument that we see that they follow their opinion. Which is reflected in these arguments here between Bishamai and Beis Hillel, is even we see it more, the foundation for this. We find that not only Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, which is the students or the yeshiva of Shammai and the yeshiva of Hillel, but Shammai and Hillel themselves also argued about this, and we see the same line of thinking. Und das ist in zwei Fällen, wo der Lishitase is mudgish b'miyuchad. And we see this in two cases where this argument is very emphasized. In ersten Fall is the Adgashe in dem, was Salibdem Lishitase is Shammai L'Kula and Hillel L'Chumre. We can see that Shammai and Hillel themselves follow their line of thinking, even when it causes Beis Shammai or Shammai himself to be lenient and Hillel to be more stringent. Which is the opposite of their usual approach. Usually it's Shammai or Beis Shammai that are Machmer, and Beis Hillel is usually Mekel. And in that zweiten is das Mudgish durch Meiser Rav. And then you have another case where they argue, and it's about an actual story that happened and how they behaved in this incident. You see how their actual conduct was regarding the story that the Rebbe will bring here. So one is in Seder Nezikin. You have in Seder Nezikin an argument, Masechta Idias, learning here. So we learn the following argument, and this is an argument between Shammai and Hillel themselves. Shammai Yaimer, so this is actually also the first Mishnah in Masechta Nida. So Shammai says, Kol Anoshim, all women, die on Shaitan. Their time of when they saw Tumah, a woman that sees blood, so she becomes Tameh. So according to Shammai, the time when she saw the blood, that's the moment, that's the time when she's Tameh. We don't go back retroactively to say that now we may have a doubt that the blood may be there from before, and therefore she's tummy retroactively as well. And Hillel says, that we have to make her tummy also retroactively from one examination to the next examination. Even if it's many days before. Meaning if a woman examined herself many days earlier, and from then until now when she saw blood, she didn't examine herself in between. So now when she sees the blood today, we're concerned that perhaps the blood was there already from after that examination. And therefore she's going to be tummy retroactively from then when that examination was. The Rabbi explains, Shammai says, as an isha versus roye dam, a woman that sees blood, is he mitame tares v'zirirton, so she will now make things that she touches tame, funderia on weiter. Only from now, when she saw the tumah, so now we see for sure that she's tame. From here going forward, she will make anything tame that she touches. Anything that she touched earlier on, before she actually saw this blood, will not become tamei. Hillel sagt, however, Hillel says, as is metame euch die Tares, was sie hat angeriert von sind nach der letzte Tar der Gebedike. Anything that she touched from her last examination when she saw that she was tahir, and now she discovers that she's tamei, anything in between that she touched, we will be concerned about this. Maybe she was already tamei, and it'll become tamei. And the Gemara is masber in the Meshten Tam. The first reason the Gemara gives to explain this machlokes between Shammai and Hillel. Shammai says, you have to place a woman on a certain status. We have a certain status that we presume regarding a woman, that a woman, until she does not see that there's actual blood that causes her to be tamei, so the woman itself has a status of being tar. That's Shammai's opinion. Hillel says, when do I say that I would place a woman on a status of purity? When it's a situation that when there is nothing weakening this status in her body. But when it comes to a woman, since it's a normal thing for a woman with the cycle to see blood, so in this case, we cannot place a woman on this status of purity. That's the argument, the way the Gemara explains it. So now the Rebbe connects it to the general line of thinking that we explained there between Shammai and Hillel. And here again we see the same line of thinking in their opinions. Shammai says, as mekukte fazach vizizetzich, or the zetzich nit gleich far de yogen. You have to look at something as it appears to you, in the general glance in it, or when you look with the general glance, what you don't see is irrelevant. Und therefore is daya shaita. So therefore we say that we look at the time right now when we see that she saw blood. There's man von is dam bepayel. We say that now when she saw the blood, and we don't look at anything before. When says nit gewen keine Ehe, when we do not know that there was when she did not actually see blood. And therefore we place her in this status to say that whatever was before, let's assume she was tired. We're not going to make any doubts about this. Now, when it appears, when you see the Ehe, that's when the Tumah begins. That's Shammai. Hillel halten aber, however, Hillel's opinion is, as me banugentechnit mit an ein of royes bechlal, it's not satisfactory to just look what appears to your eyes now. You have to look also and investigate the details of what caused her to see blood. Das was it's shaita. The fact that she sees now this blood is das a mesuviv. Look at, examine this, investigate this matter further. This is an outcome of something. Because there's a certain nature. There's the weakening of this status of tara because there's a certain nature of the woman's body. The zach von der is an inyan tivi by an isha. For her to see blood is a natural thing from a woman. So therefore Hillel says we can't just go with the present of what we see right now and say that everything before she has a status of purity. Und die Tares and Tameh misafik al kolpanim. So therefore the Tares, the things that were Tar that she touched earlier, will become Tameh because we have a doubt. We don't know, that perhaps we have to investigate further, and we have to say that maybe before she was also Tameh. So here again we see the same line of thinking between Hillel and Shammai themselves. Now, Eichen Seder Mayed, when you look in Seder Mayed, in Masechta Shabbos, Zetman, Ot, that Unterschied, in the Shittis from Shammai and Hillel, this difference, this argument between Shammai and Hillel themselves, in the Drei Fallen, there were three different cases, Wegen an Nachri, was es gekommen sich Megai sein, with a guy that came to convert to be a ger. In ein Fall hat Nachri gesagt, in one case the guy said, Gaireni amanashe tlamdeni na Teirish b'ksav. I want to be a ger with the condition that you teach me only Teirish b'ksav. In der zweiten Fall hat gesagt, Gaireni amanashe tlamdeni kala Teire kula kishani aymed al regal achas. I want to be a ger with the condition that you'll teach me the entire Teire standing on one foot. Und in der dritte Fall hat gesagt, in the third case he said, Gaireni amanashe tlatzimene kain gadol. That with the condition that you can appoint me to become a Kohen Gadol. And in the Yala that I've fallen, in all these three cases, is Shammai, Shammai rejected them. These are conditions that are ridiculous or unacceptable. On Hillel, Hillel accepted them and converted them. So here as well, it's not understood in either way you look at it. Since you have the rule, as man darf sich abhalten von Mekabel sein Gerim and a leichten Neufen. We do not accept Gerim lightly. Und befragt, dass da handelt sich wegen Gerim, was sagen klar, als Geris is al menas. Specifically here, if you have a ger that comes and is making conditions, was is atnai, Chelek the boy, and these conditions is unacceptable conditions. Und b'shasene kommt sich megai sein. B'chdei zu de Griechen durch dem asrare v'chayetze v'zeh. A person that wants to be a ger because he wants to reach a certain level of authority or a certain position, or that is nit mekabel of sich ganz teire. He doesn't accept upon himself all of teire, is menem nit mekabel. We don't accept such a ger. Heint v'yazoi hat ze Hillel mekabel gewen. So the question is, how did Hillel accept these gerim? On oi by oti gerim is the Kabbalah's geros yogeven kedeboy. And if in this case accepting them as gerim was appropriate, as you see after the fact what happened, as they did become actual, real, authentic gerim, and so we see that this retroactively shows us that they were sincere. Is wie kommt das, was Shammai hat sie abgestoppt? So then why is it that Shammai did not sense this, and why did Shammai reject them? So the asbara is kanal. So the explanation is like we explained before, and here we see another perfect example for the two approaches of Shammai and Hillel. By Shammai l'shitasai, Shammai, which follows his line of thinking, at machriya gevendem einov royes b'chlal. So to him, what matters most is when you look at something, you determine it based on the general glance that you have. The klal is the gemashmos from zeireid un oifen kabbalas ageris. When you look at the general mashmas, the general meaning of what they're trying to say, and the way they want to be accepted as a ger, that's what you have to pay attention to. That's what determines the situation. You're looking at what they were asking for was inappropriate, so therefore Shammai rejected them. Because what you are hearing in general terms of what they're saying, that is what determines it. Even though, like I said before, he's not oblivious to the details. He knows that if you inspect further, you may discover differently. But nevertheless, Torah comes back and says that we're going to paskin based on what you heard and what they were saying in general terms. And on the other hand, Hillel abalishitasai, Hillel, according to his thinking, says, Hadan given einem inyan, that is, loiti piratim v'sibis hadavar. He judges the matter and he says we determine it according to the details and in inspecting that matter further. And when you see the causes for what happened here, or v'sibis hadibur, the cause of what they were saying. And what he saw was, as the allegatim, villen sich megai sein mit anemes. He investigated the matter and he saw that they were sincere. Und das was dibur benutzach hanal, and the fact that when they spoke, they set these unacceptable conditions is a silly bazaiting in time. It was really just a side reason. It wasn't that they were not sincere. As felt in the idea begetted the Kohen Gadol v'chayetze b'zeh, they were not knowledgeable. They were unaware of the fact that a ger cannot become a Kohen Gadol. The moment they became aware of what Torah said about this, they dropped that condition because they really were sincere. So Hillel made a further investigation about this matter, and that determines the halacha. Shammai says, even after you make that further investigation, and you see that they may be sincere, but you can't go away from what they actually say. You have to paskin the din based on what they actually say, not until they'll actually come and tell you, I'm ready to drop any conditions, could you accept them as a get? And say the Kachim, now we come to another place where we find this argument with the same line of thinking in Kachim, Masechta Chulin. So there it talks about eating on the same table, milchiks, dairy, and fleishiks, meat. Ha'oif oile magvina la shulchan, you can eat oif, a piece of chicken together, and this could also be on the same table. Cheese, ve'enei nechal, of course you can't eat them together, but they can be on the same table. Divrei Beishamai, this is Beishamai's opinion. Or Beisilul say, loy oile, they should not come onto the same table, v'loy nechal, and they're not eaten together. So here we see again the same point. Beishamai's opinion is, as mizet zach, you have to look at the matter, das harev bringen auf den Tisch. Just looking at this itself, that you're putting this chicken on the table and this cheese on the table. Kamaishahu, look at it as it appears, as it is. Was wie das ist for sich, where as it is for itself, uns ist doch nicht ein Chash isse zu harev bringen auf den Tisch zusammen mit Gewinner. So this in itself, there is no concern there. There's no issue of having the chicken on the table and the cheese on the table. That itself is not an issue. On its appearance, on its surface. There's no issue with this, so therefore that is allowed. But on the other hand, Beisilul's opinion is l'shitasam. According to their opinion, as medarf sich misbeine seinen pratim, that you have to investigate this matter further and look at the details here. Ubenidin di dan, and in our case, als sibufun amasuviv. Don't only look at the facts of what you see right now, but look at also of what it could cause. Was wird davon herauskommen? What may come out of this? That a reiv brengen auf den Tisch, when you bring on the table the chicken and the cheese, is a sibit su amasuviv. It's not only the facts of what's here now, but it's also a cause to an outcome. A person has an inclination, a person has a desire, which could be even negative. If you allow a person to bring the cheese and the chicken on the table together, this is a concern, that this may cause that he should come and eat them together. So therefore you see here, Beis Hillel is the one that is saying that we have to determine this halacha based on the details, looking not only at the facts the way they appear now, but also looking at what it is here now as a cause for what may happen later. May I pluck this beseder taras? Then we have also an argument from one of the arguments that there is in seder taras. Eine von sei und lefi zeh wird sein muvon benidden di dan. And then based on this machlokes that we'll explain here in seder taras, we'll come back also to the case that we began with, which is the machlokes regarding the mizbeach and the plates of gold or copper that there is on the mizbechais. In Masechta Kelim is da machlokes. In Masechta Kelim there's the following argument: mit bechais svarim. When you have coverings for Sfarim, bein mitziyarais, whether these are coverings that have a design on it, bein she'enan mitziyarais, whether these are coverings that do not have a design on it, tmeyais, they're susceptible to tumah, kedivrei Beishamai. That's Beishamai's opinion. Beisilul laimrin, Beisilul say it depends. Mitziyarais tahiris. If these coverings have designs on it, so then it's tahiris. It's not susceptible to tumah. V'she'enan mitziyarais. But if it's not design, has no design in it, then tmeyas. Then it's susceptible to tumah. Okay, so now what is the basis of this machlokes here? Whether it's design, not design, is the Ragat Shaver mevayer zer machlokes. So the Ragat Shaver explains their machlokes in a unique fashion in the following way. Al Yisayit from the Ravid, based on what it says in the Ravid, is mevayer der Unterschied zwischen Tik und Chipui. There's a difference between a tik, which is a case, und chipui, and just a covering. As a tik, a shedel, tzudek, when you have something which is covering a sefer, but it's not just a plain cover, but it's actually sort of a case which protects it. Dient zu beschützen das, was gefindt sich in dem tik. So what does it do? What is its purpose? It actually protects what's inside the case. Und der Far wird das Tomei, and therefore this is an item that is susceptible to Tomei, weil das ist Besog von Misham Sheyadam. Because this is something which is considered to be a keli, which is a use for a person. I own a sefer, I own this item, and I want to protect it, so I put it inside this case to protect it from myself. Aber a chipui. But when you have a covering, a tzudek, so that is nutzt nicht zu schützen dem zugedeckte Sach. That does not serve in any way to protect what's covered. Nor din plays lenai. It's just to beautify it. You cover it to have a beautiful cover. The far is this nit tame. So if it's just for beauty's sake, but it doesn't actually serve for any protection, so then that is not susceptible to tumah. That's not considered to be something which is mishamshei adam, that it serves you to protect the item that you own. It just beautifies the sefer. Und then besteht the machlekes from Beshame and Besilel. So with this, the Rogatchover explains the argument between Beshame and Besilel. When you have these coverings that have a design in it, because they have a design in it, so we see that it's clearly just for the beauty, for the sefer, which is wrapped in this covering. So therefore the status of this is just as a covering. Und der Fahr halten Besilel as is in Toir. So therefore Besilel says, so in that case, if it's just a covering for the sefer, to beautify the sefer, but it's not a use for you to protect the sefer for your use, so then it's Toir. But the covering which is not designed was then a nitlanai, so it's not for the beauty of the sefer, but it's actually serving as a case to protect the sefer. Then is a tummy. So that's something that you have a use from, and therefore it is susceptible to tummy. On the other hand, Beishamai say, as oich chipui kelim is tameh, that if we don't distinguish, it doesn't matter, that whether it's a case, whether it's a covering for the keli, or in this case for the sefer, either way it's susceptible to tumah. That's the explanation of the machlekes according to the Rogatchover. The hezbollah from Zeh machlekes is verstandig al pianal. So the explanation of this machlekes is understood based on what we said before. Beishamai halten, Beishamai's opinion is, as mekuked of the zach, later klolles together, that we have to determine that something, its status, based on the general outline of what this is. Mitbechais. So over here we have these coverings. Nit reingeendig in zugekommene praten. And even if you investigate and you see that there are further details, that doesn't matter. That doesn't determine what it is. And when you just look generally, Zetman as beide mine mitbechais, that both of these coverings zenen via keli shimush zu badekin und mashitzen die kelim. So what you see here is that you have a sefer that could be exposed and open, and then it can be covered. Covered serves as a protection. So therefore, regardless of what the covering is, when you look generally, you see here a covering, a protection. So therefore, that's something that has a use for the person that gets this protection of his object, of his sefer, so it's susceptible to tumah. Like Beis Hillel, however, Beis Hillel's opinion is that from you have to inspect the matter further and see the details here. Over here in our case, mit die Prat und was weisen dem Zweck und Tachlis as Shimush für jeder Mim Bazunder. You have to look specifically what is the purpose and goal of the covering that you're using here. If it's design coverings, Zweck is Zliben Neu von der verdeckte Kelim, since the whole purpose is just to beautify the Keli itself. Haben sie Adem von Chipui. So therefore, this just has a halacha of a covering of the keli, which is not a use directly for the person himself. It's just as a covering, as to beautify the sefer. Was is bottled to the keli, and therefore this covering becomes bottled to the keli itself. Und hatav sich nit kein gather from keli, and therefore this covering does not become defined for itself as a keli. It's just to beautify the sefer. So it's all about the sefer. So it's bottled to the sefer. It's insignificant on its own. So therefore these coverings are not susceptible to tumah. However, when you have a covering which is not designed, so therefore their purpose is not to add beauty to the kelim, nor is eine Viatik, was nutzt zu beschützen und verhitten the kelim. Rather, it's a case which is there to protect and hold the keli, in this case the sefer, inside this case. So therefore, it's a keli for itself, which a person uses, and therefore it does become tameh. So this is the explanation of the machlekes of Beishamai and Besilel in Masechta Kelim, where we see the same line of thinking. And we find, as Rabbi Eliezer halt vi Beishamai, that Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Beis Shammai on this matter, Udi Chachamim vi das B'Hillel. And the Chachamim agreed to B'Hillel on this matter, as the Rogatchover brings over there. So now, after all of this, we come back to the Machlokes regarding the Mizbachais in the Beis HaMikdash, where Beishamai, and that's not Beishamai directly, but it's Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, which are following the same line of thinking of Beishamai and B'Hillel, and Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim are arguing regarding the Mizbachais, where the Rabbi Eliezer says that they're compared to Adama, and therefore they are Tahir, they're not susceptible to Tumah, and the Chachamim say, Mipnei She'ein Mitzupin. And according to the Rambam's opinion, Mipnei She'ein Mitzupin actually means that this is a reason why they should be Tahir. Because you're not accessing the keli itself directly, it's only through the plate, so therefore it's going to be Tahir. So now we'll see, according to the Rambam's Pshat, how this Machlokes of Rebbe Eliezer and Chachamim follows the same Lishitase, the same logic as all these arguments here between Beishamai and B'Hillel. After all of this, we could also see the reason for the explanation. The same line of thinking in the Mishnah from Seif Chagiga Anal, in the Mishnah in the end of Chagiga. The Rambam's opinion is as Rabbi Eliezer, was a Talmud from Beishamai. Rabbi Eliezer, which was a student of Beishamai. And the Rabbanon gain l'shitasam from Beishamai and B'Hillel. They're following the same rationale of the argument that there is between Beishamai and B'Hillel. In the Demante Pluktis, in the above mentioned arguments where we see in each Seder of Shas that they argue about. The Rabbi Eliezer halt. So Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is, as that Sipui is metame, that the fact that there's a covering, that's actually a reason that the covering should bring tumah. Why? Vibald, as the klol is the gerinyan, fun mizbeach is kishmai. Because according to Rabbi Eliezer, you have to look at the general outline of what something is. And therefore, when you look at a mizbeach, in the general glance at a mizbeach, so what do you see? As its name actually indicates, and actually this is what it generally is, and this is the general outline of every detail of it. A prat from mizbeach and a chayshes. It's all a detail of the copper mizbeach. This is a mizbeach and a chayshes, or the funzav. It's either a copper mizbeach or a golden mizbeach. For zenem a kabel tumah. So these are two materials of metal which are susceptible to tumah. And you do not determine the entity of the mizbeach, was in pratius from mizbeach, that if you look at the matter in detail, so then you'll see as the nechayshes vizav at sipui and at tafel again is there nechayshes vizav at sipui and at tafel to mizbeach. So then you'll discover that even though it looks like a gold mizbeach or a copper mizbeach, and that's actually its name, so that's its appearance. But on further investigation, you'll discover that it's really, no, it's wood, and it's all, and the covering, the plate is all secondary, and it's the main thing over here is the mizbeach itself. But that's not how you determine it. You determine it on its general, on the general appearance of it, and even the name that it has, which is gold or silver. Obemele, volt is given tame, wenn nit das, was die Teire sagt, als sie seinen Punkt wie Karka, was es nit bekabel kein Tome. So therefore Rabbi Eliezer says that the tzipui, the plate, is actually a reason for it to be tame. That's the general appearance of what it is. So if not for the fact that the Torah specifically refers to these mizbachais as being karka, as being like the ground, it would be mekabel tome. Chachamim halte, however, Chachamim's opinion is, as medarf net onkommen zum limit from karka. You don't need a special pasuk that it is compared to the ground to say that it's not susceptible to tumah. Chach bechlalos ubeinyana, even though at the general appearance of it and on what the mizbeach is there mizbeach and a chayshes va'azav. The mizbeach is the copper or gold mizbeach, that's its name. A kli from mateches, which is a metal vessel, and the far verter as a yongeruf, and that's even its name. Aber mitzat prati am mizbechais is doch die matches hatzipui. But if you investigate this further, you'll see that what is this gold? What is this copper here? It's only a plate. It's only a cover. Und hatzipui velacha is only zayin. And when you have a plate, whatever it may be, from zav adon chayshes, even if it's gold or copper, which is a metal, is not a tafel. It's only a secondary thing to this entity of what it is. B'meile bottle to the keli, and therefore the plate itself is insignificant, and therefore it can't be mekabel tumah in its own right. B'meile can the keli euch nicht tame werden zu lieb dem Zipui. And as we explained earlier, even the keli itself cannot be tame because I am touching the keli through this plate. Because no, only if you touch the keli directly does it become tame, not if you touch it through the plate that's on it. So therefore, if you examine the matter further, you see what this mizbech really is. That it's only the plate of it, the gold and the copper is just a plate. And therefore the details of what this plate, of what this metal is, that is what determines the matter. So therefore there's no need for a special pasuk to say that these mizbuchais cannot become tameh, nor says the rov genug dem tam epnei shehem etzupim. It's enough to say the reason that they are plated. The fact that they are plated is the reason why they're tar. The plate itself is insignificant, and the keli itself is not being accessed directly, only through the plate, and therefore there's no tumor whatsoever. So we can see that the Rambam's hezbid and the opinion of the Chachamim is now following the machlekes now between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is following the general rationale of their argument that we find between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in many different cases. Based on this, we'll also understand the connection of the end of the Masechta and the beginning of the Masechta of Chagige. Over there's also an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Was euch irne kodes asbare is dieselbe wie bei der Machlekes von Rabbi Eliezer v'Chachamim b'siyam ha'Masechta. Also here, the point of the argument revolves around the same point as it is in the end of the Masechta. In the Erste Mishnah learning, we learn in the first Mishnah the following machlekes regarding the karbanos that have to be brought on a Yom Tov. There's a oilas re'iyah that's brought, which is brought as a carbon oila, fully burnt on the Mizbeach, and then the Shalmi Chagiga that's brought, which is a carbon Shlomim, part of it is burnt in the Mizbeach, part of it goes to the Kayanim to eat, and part of it goes to the owner that brought the carbon to eat as well. So now the Mishnah discusses the size and the value of this animal that you bring. What's the minimum value of it? The carbon oilas re'iyah has to be the minimum value of 2 silver coins. And the carbon chagige, which is a shlamim, has to only be 1 coin. Beis Hillel say ha're'iyah ma kesef. No, it's the other way around. The carbon oilas re'iyah, that's 1 silver coin. V'chagige shtei kesef. And it's the carbon chagige that has to be 2 silver coins. Beis Shammai sagen as the oilas re'iyah was man darf bringen, wenn mis oile regel. That it's the carbon oilas re'iyah that every yid has to bring when he's oile regel to the Beis HaMikdash, darf sein Wert shtei kesef. It's to be 2 silver coins. Und die Shalmi Chagige megen sein Wert weniger, their value could be less, more kesef, 1 silver coin. Beis Hillel sagen verkehrt, Beis Hillel say the reverse, as die Shalmi Chagige davon haben, a gressere shivui vi oilas re'iyah. The value of the carbon shlamim, the Chagige, has to be double or more than the oilas re'iyah. Is the Gemara Mevayr. So the Gemara explains, as Beis Shammai halten, the basis of Beis Shammai's opinion is, Sha're'iyah, Oila kula legavaya. The carbon oilas re'iyah, the reason why it is more valuable, and when you bring it as a carbon, it has to be 2 kesef, because it's all dedicated and burnt in the mizbech for Hashem. Mashenkim b'chagige. Chagige is not dedicated to that extent completely to Hashem. Part of it is going to go to the kayanim and the owner to eat. As oilas re'iyah, wie bald is in ganzen legavaya, the oilas re'iyah, which is fully dedicated to Hashem, darf sie sein mehr wert wie Shalmi Chagige. So therefore it has to be more valuable. You invest in that more than the shlamim, which is achilas b'nei adam, which people are also going to be eating from it. Beis Hillel again, but Beis Hillel's opinion is adarabe. On the contrary, Chagiga adife, the carbon Chagiga is superior. You should invest more money in the Chagiga. There's bashtei achilas, because there are 2 that have to eat from this. The Mizbeach has to eat from this, and the Kayanim and the people also, that the owner also eats from this. So therefore they have to have more, a bigger animal, so that there should be enough for all the achilas here. So what's the basis of their machlekes? So this hays, what we see here is the same point. If you're going to look at the concept of what a carbon is in its general terms, and you want to define it this way, darf ois kommen, so then it would come out as a carbon was bringt in ganzen legavaya, that a carbon that's being brought and totally dedicated to Hashem, burnt in the Mizbeach, darf sein Wert mehr wie a carbon was es bloß teilweise legavaya. It should be worth more, invest in that more, than a carbon that only partially is being brought legavaya. Because part of it is being eaten by people, and when it's being eaten by people, it's not fully legavaya. That's shittas Beishamai. So Beishamai, which looks at things with the general outline of what it is, and therefore what you see over here is the carbon oila is simply the carbon that's more fully dedicated to Hashem. However, when you examine this matter further and you look at the details, is adarabe. So then, as Beis Hillel says, you see on the contrary. Afaker to maskana, you come to the opposite conclusion. Achilas kainim, this that the kainim eat from this carbon. Unayach achilas misbailim, and also the fact that the owner gets a portion to eat from this funim carbon is oich a mitzvah. That's also a mitzvah. Ubemela is oich zeir achile an inyan fun gavaya. So therefore we could say that even their achila, although it's not on the same status as the achila of the mizbeach, but it's also a mitzvah, and it's also considered to be part of the carbon which is dedicated for Hashem. So therefore, Beis Hillel say it comes out as adarabe chagiga adife. That over here we have to say that no, you invest more into the carbon chagiga with shittas Beis Hillel. Habendik shtei achilas legavoya, because really both of the achilas, what goes to the mizbeach and also what the people are eating, are all considered to be legavoya. And therefore the value that you invest in this should be more than the carbon chagiga. So we see the same line of thinking, whether you look at what a carbon is in its general terms, and generally speaking, the Eilis Riyah is much more dedicated to Hashem, or you look at it and investigate the matter and you look at the details and you see that be'emes, there is also an aspect of Gavaya in the Achila of the people. And therefore, Adarabah, it deserves to be invested in that more, so you should have enough for the Achila of the Mizbeach and the Achila of the people. Light and Bir Anal in the Svara, from the Rabbanon al Pidas Rambam. According to the explanation that we gave in the opinion of the Rabbanon, according to the Rambam, that the point of the Rabbanon's opinion was that the tzipui, the cover, the plate on the Mizbeach, is something which is external. It doesn't determine what the Mizbeach itself is. Is euch verstandig, we could also understand, B'siyam HaMesechta, in the conclusion of the Mesechta, the Shayches, V'kesher, Tzvishen, di zwei Memris, the connection of these two statements in the Gemara, that the Gemara later says, as ein shel Gehenim sheletas, or shel Gehenim, the fire of the Gehenim does not have any power in Talmidei Chachamim, over Talmidei Chachamim, u'Paishe Yisrael, and also doesn't have any power over the sinners amongst Eden. And the Gemara there explains this, but the point is that Talmidei Chachamim and Paishe Yisrael are saved from the fire of Gehenim. Und der Hemshech v'shayches zum Iyun von Tzipui HaMizbeach. And the continuation of this, and the relation to the subject of a Mizbeach, and the covering of the Mizbeach. What's the connection here? Nach der Mishnah and Gemara wegen dem Mizbeach and Mikdash. After, you have the Mishnah and the Gemara which explains the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash. Was durch hakravas hakarbanos of zei wird aufgetan der v'shachanti b'seichem in Mikdash. And when you bring the karbanos on them, that's how you bring down the Shechina should dwell in the Beis HaMikdash. Und alachre, wie the Gemara is masber die Idee von der Rabbanon. And after, the Gemara explains the opinion of the Rabbanon L'das HaRambam, specifically according to the Rambam, as mekukt sich ein in protei adova, that when you examine the details of what this Mizbeach is, zetmen, so what you see is atzipui. You see that the metal, the plate, which is the gold or copper, is just a plate. Was is bottled to mikra keli, and that's insignificant, and it's really one with the keli itself. And the keli is defined as a wooden Mizbeach. Es behemshich lezeh bringt die Gemara the members benegei dem v'shachanti b'seicha b'seich kalechet v'echet mi Yisrael. The Gemara brings the application of this, of the dwelling of the Shechina, how this applies to every single Yid. Kanal Sif Aleph, that these two are related. Was jede Yid tutoif der Avede in Zayin Mikdash HaPrati, and how every Yid could bring about the Mikdash HaPrati in himself. Und therein is euch das Svara Hanal. And here regarding every individual Yid, we also see the same logic, the same approach how we look at a Yid. As mizich mizbainen, kipsakdim Beis Hillel. If you reflect and you look deeper, as Beis Hillel says, in Prateya and Yanim, in the details of what a Yid is, very klar, it becomes clear, as afiladi in Yanim bilti ritzuyim, even if you see any negativity. Afiladi das was mezad by Paishe Yisrael. Even those negative things that you see by those that have this title of being Paishe Yisrael, sinners of Israel. However, what you have to see by further examination and looking into this, that this is not the true identity. Das ist nicht mehr wie a Zippui. This is not more than an outer plate. A zugegebene Zudek, an added covering. Was ist Tafel und Bottle zu sein Etzemuhus, which is secondary and insignificant when you look at the true entity of who they are. That etzem upnimius von a Yidin is a zevi a mizbeach. The essence and a Yid really is like a mizbeach. Toivu kedusha, only good and holiness. Und der Fahr is nicht shaykh as der Urshel Gehenem soll shaylet sein say. And therefore, the Gemara is concluding it's impossible that the fire of Gehenem should reach and touch the essence of who a Yid is. That's the connection of the Mizbeach and its covering, or its plate, and the Yid, and the covering, the outer negativity that it may appear. But you have to look at the depth of who a Yid really is. And now, this point is Masim is also fitting with the Klal is the Geschichte from Beis Hillel, wie man darf gucken auf a Yidin, with the general approach of Beis Hillel, how one has to look at a Yid. Ukamudgish, and this is emphasized, in the Rebbe de Monte Machlekes from Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, in the above mentioned Machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, as Beis Shammai sagt, Kala kamay shehi, that when you look at a Kala and you praise her for what she is, for what her appearance is. Und Beis Hillel sagt, Kala noa v'chasuda, that regardless, every single Kala, you have to praise her as being beautiful. Und so zeich menum is in the Nemen, Shammai and Hillel. And you actually see the difference in their approach hinted in their names. Shammai and Hillel. Says Yedua, so it's known as follows. When we talk about the Chassan and the Kala, as the Kadosh Baruch Hu und Knesset Yisrael werden angerufen Chassan and Kala, that the Eibishter and Yidden are compared to a Chassan and Kala. As it ever brings in the Ha'ara, the entire Shir Hashirim is based on this. So halt Beis Shammai, so by Shammai's opinion is, for Shammai is Meloshen HaShomer Chaysav, a person that evaluates, he measures his ways. Sham leiten Abteich von Schatzen und Mesten die Drachen. When a person measures and evaluates the ways that he goes in. As man darf medaktig sein und abschätzen genau dem Eufen Anhage von a Yidin, wie sie führen sich bepeil, kala kamoshi, that you have to look and examine a Yid for everything that he's doing, as is. You see his actions, you see his activity, and you see what he is, and that's how you determine what the person is. Und behassen damit is the Anhage mitzeh. And that's how you have to treat them as well. That's how you praise them, and that's the attitude that you have to them. In other words, you have to take into account all of their activity and everything that you can see, even externally, in their behavior. Aber, on the other hand, though, Beis Hillel was his Meloshen bialei neire, which means a candle that's shining. They beleuchten, they illuminate, and look and illuminate deeper in. Und das ist Kaveya, and this is what determines how we treat this entity or this Yid even here in this world. The Pnimi is von jeder Sach. You have to look what's deeper inside the person. You can't just determine the reality of who this Yid is by looking at the external of everything that he does and being medactic and every of his actions and so on, but don't look at the motives or look at the essence of the person deeper. Zog Beis Hillel, and therefore Beis Hillel say, as bipnimius is yed the Yid tev, that internally every single Yid is only good. Kale noa v'chasuda, a kale which is beautiful and attractive. Und die Hachacha v'azbar in them. And here, Beis Hillel gives the proof and the explanation for this as follows. And here there's a very powerful point that you see here in this mashal. Mashal Adam, the analogy of a person, shalokach mekach min hashuk, that bought something in the marketplace. Yishapchenu be'einav chulu. So obviously praise what he bought. Don't point out the defects in this. That's the mashal. So now what this means in the relationship between the Eibishter and the Yidden is as follows. Since the Eibishter bought himself this object as an acquisition, which means that the Eibishter himself chose every single Yid. Is doch barer. So therefore it's clear as be'etzem is der mekach teuve kedusha. If this is the Eibishter's choice, so in essence every single Yid is good and holy. In Chitzonius, that's not on, even though externally you don't see this, and it is abinit, it doesn't change the real entity of who the Yid is. Bepnimius, be'etzem is teuf. Internally and in his essence, he's only good. V'balze zicher, as der Chassan, Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since it's short to us, it's clear that who's the Chassan here? It's the Eibishter, hat ausgekliven und genommen dem Mekach. It's the Eibishter that shows Yidden as his acquisition, is das gewiss, a Kale, Noah, v'chasuda. So most certainly every single Yid is a beautiful and attractive Kale. Now thereby fordert sich der Tanai, but over here the Gemara gives the condition. In order to have the ability to reveal this essence, so the Gemara says the following condition, Kehemshach Gemara b'ksubis. As the continuation, the Gemara says there in Ksubis, Mu'ureves Amabrias, that a person should be aware of the different opinions of different people, which means B'shas Mizmu'urev Amabrias, when you're aware of what goes on amongst people, which means Matanonta Akara and Wissen, that you have a very good awareness and a very good sense from the Maimah, the Matzav and Olam Haza, of the matters and of things that are going on in this world. All the challenges that the world can bring to you. So a person is not just oblivious and allows himself to do whatever he wants, and he's not aware of the pitfalls and the challenges that he will get involved in. Is damalt, so when a person has that awareness, so then, when you have these awareness of these nisyanis, so you will eventually come to find the truth and the good. That every yid is beautiful and attractive. And this is the Araf HaYeder, and this is also the lesson that everyone has to take from here. When you see in another Yid something that's negative, God forbid, so you can think to yourself, as Yener is in a matzav unzir, that this person is in a condition and in such a kind of situation, he's lame, he's blind, he's lacking. How could I have a common language with him? I can't explain this to him. I can't talk to him because he's in a different world. He's in a place which is so negative that I can't explain him anything. So Beis responds to this and say, this is not true. Why are you looking at him just with eyes of flesh? Why are you looking at him with such a kind of outlook? Don't look at his appearance. If the Eibusher chose this Yid, und ihm genommen als am Mekach, and the Eibusher took him as his acquisition, is sicher, as is akala nova chasuda. Most definitely, he's a beautiful Yid. Und wie bald man hat es dir bewiesen, so since this Yid was shown to you, darfst du verstehen, so what you have to understand is, as das ist that you have to reveal, you have to illuminate this beauty in the Yid, helfen and plecken in him sein Plimius, to help him discover and reveal this beauty that he has inside of him. Und durch der Aveda in Zman HaGolus, geschittes Beis Davke, and through this kind of Aveda, with this approach, according to Beis Hillel, Varim says, Doch halacha ke Beis Hillel, we always follow and paskin like Beis Hillel, and says, gar nicht kein Hava minute zu finden sich geschittes Beis Shammai. So much so that there's no thought even to follow Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, we never follow his opinion. As me guckt nicht auf a Yidin wie zetois b'nei basar. You don't examine and determine who a Yid is as he appears with your eyes of flesh. You look deeper and see the pnimi is the innermost part of who a Yid is. Every Yid is a beautiful kala. You go and you pay attention to every single Yid, and you do whatever you have to bring and reveal this pnimius that's inside of him. Through this, we will merit to the marriage from Yidden mit dem Eibishter, to the ultimate marriage, as it says it in the Medrash, between Yidden and the Eibishter, und demult kann schon sein, und es wird sein der Halacha ke Beis Shammai. And then it could be, and it will be the halacha like Beis Shammai, which means that even externally, even every Yid will be beautiful and perfect. When the Eibusher will remove the spirit of impurity of the world, and then we will see revealed, and even for our eyes of flesh, as Yed the Yid, that every single Yid, Kale Kamoishihi, as he is and as an external appearance, is a Kale Noah V'Chasuda, is a beautiful and attractive Kale of the Eibishter.